Alonso slams new FIA rule. Alonso is known for his talent and outspoken nature, and this time is no different. In fact, he's so furious about the new rule that he's gone on record to call it one of the worst decisions he's ever seen in his entire career. But what is this rule that has got Alonso so fired up? Well, sit tight, because we're about to take you on a wild ride through the world of FIA penalties. Welcome to the F1 Racing Channel, where we bring you all the latest news and updates from the adrenaline-fueled world of Formula One. Today we're delving into one of the most significant recent controversies to hit the sport, a new FIA rule that has caused Fernando Alonso to slam it. Let's start with the mildest penalty a driver can receive, a warning. These are typically given for exceeding track limits or minor rule infractions. However, accumulate enough warnings and you could face a time penalty. Think of it as a gentle nudge to remind drivers to play fair and keep it clean. Moving up the ladder, we have reprimands. These are issued for more serious offenses, and drivers are allowed up to 4 per season before facing a 10th-place grid penalty for their 5th. Examples of reprimands include non-sporting offenses like wearing a political shirt during a race, or sporting offenses like driving with loose seatbelts. It's like a stern talking to from the FIA, reminding drivers that there are rules for a reason. Next, we have time penalties. These are served during pit stops, with the crew unable to work on the car until the penalty has been served. Failure to serve the penalty results in it being added to the driver's finishing time. Reasons for time penalties can range from tire infringement to pit lane speeding. It's like a timeout for drivers, a chance to reflect on their actions and make amends. Then there's the drive-through penalty, where drivers must drive through the pit lane and rejoin the race, or the 10-second stop-and-go penalty, where they must pit and wait for 10 seconds before rejoining without any work being done on their car. These are more serious penalties intended to remind drivers that their actions have consequences. If a driver commits a serious offense, such as not providing a required fuel sample after the race, they could face the ultimate punishment: disqualification from the race. The world saw this happen to Sebastian Vettel at the 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix. It was a bitter pill to swallow for his team, but the regulations are in place to ensure everyone plays by the rules. In rare cases where a driver commits an extreme violation, they may face a suspension from a number of races. But let's hope it never comes to that. These penalties are a last resort, and they're designed to keep drivers and spectators safe while promoting a culture of responsible racing. Whether it's a gentle warning or a more severe disqualification, every penalty plays a crucial role in ensuring that the world of Formula One is as fair and safe as possible. And as for Fernando Alonso's opinions on the new FIA rule, you'll have to stay tuned till the end. Now, let's take a deep dive into F1 penalties and explore how drivers and teams can face severe consequences for breaking the rules. First up, let's talk about teams. A team that has been caught cheating may be subject to severe penalties. Take Red Bull, for example. They went over their budget in 2021 and lost access to the wind tunnel for aerodynamic testing. Meanwhile, Aston Martin had to cough up $450,000 for more minor breaches of the cost cap. And who could forget Crashgate in 2008, when Renault was caught telling a driver to purposely crash into a wall to help their other driver win? The team received a 2-year disqualification suspension period, and team principal Flavio Briatore was given a life ban from F1. In the high-speed world of Formula One, every driver is pushing themselves and their cars to the absolute limit in pursuit of victory. But with so much at stake, it's essential to have a system in place to ensure fair play and prevent dangerous driving. During a race, if a driver commits a big offense, such as causing a collision or ignoring a yellow flag, the stewards will investigate the incident and penalize the guilty driver immediately. This might involve a time penalty, a drive-through penalty, or even disqualification from the race. However, penalties are usually assessed after the race is finished for smaller offenses, such as speeding in the pit lane or crossing the track boundary. This allows the stewards to focus on more pressing matters during the race itself, such as ensuring the safety of the drivers and marshals. Drivers who commit multiple offenses during a race weekend can also accumulate penalty points on their super license. If a driver reaches 12 points in a 12-month period, they face an automatic 1-race ban. This system ensures that repeat offenders are held accountable for their actions and encourages drivers to race fairly and within the rules. Of course, only some incidents on track are clear-cut, and the stewards have a difficult job in assessing each incident and determining the appropriate penalty. They must take into account a range of factors, including the severity of the offense, the potential danger to other drivers, and any mitigating circumstances that might have contributed to the incident. Despite the challenges of enforcing the rules and penalties in Formula One, it's clear that the sport takes safety and fair play very seriously. By holding drivers accountable for their actions and promoting a culture of responsible racing, F1 remains one of the most exciting and prestigious motorsports in the world. But what if a driver or team feels they were wrongly penalized? They can appeal the decision with the FIA, just like Fernando Alonso did in Saudi Arabia when he was demoted to 4th place after receiving a 10-second penalty for a grid box infringement. His team, Aston Martin, appealed the decision, and the FIA agreed that the penalty was unjust, and Alonso's post-race time penalty was overturned. The 2023 F1 season is finally here, and it's time to rev up our engines. With new rookies on the grid and exciting rule changes, this year's season promises to be nail-biting. First, the FIA has implemented some major changes in the rules to ensure that the teams battle it on a level playing field. One of the most significant changes is the raised floor edges, which will help teams combat the porpoising issues that plagued them last year. This change will allow teams to adjust the car to a lower height, reducing the porpoising effect and increasing aerodynamic efficiency. Another change that fans will be excited about is the use of tires during qualifying, which will be tested in 2 races of the season. This change means that drivers must use specific tire types for each part of the qualifying session, making the competition even more challenging. The FIA has also mandated that all cars have a standard size throat for the diffuser, which will increase the downforce and accelerate airflow. Additionally, there will be double the number of sprint races this season, providing even more opportunities for drivers to showcase their skills. Weight has been another issue for teams, and the FIA has addressed this by allowing Formula One cars to take the track slightly lighter. With the minimum weight reduced by 2 kilograms, teams will now have an easier time getting their cars to weigh during the season. Fuel temperature issues were also a constant problem last season, but the FIA has mandated that fuel temperature must be 10 degrees or less than the ambient temperature, which will be determined by a weather service approved by the FIA. The front wing guidelines have been made stricter for this season. This change comes after Mercedes used a front wing containing several flaps that helped create more downforce, which other teams in the paddock were not pleased about. As we gear up for the first race of the season, we can't wait to see how these rule changes will affect the outcome of the races. And with new rookies on the grid, like the highly anticipated Juan Garcia and Maria Lopez, the competition is sure to be fierce. Now we all know that the FIA loves to make some interesting decisions, and they've done it again. The Australian Grand Prix has always been one of the most exciting races on the Formula One calendar. The adrenaline-fueled atmosphere in the pit lane as teams prepare for the start of the race, the roar of the engines as the cars line up on the grid, and the crowd's loud cheers as the lights go out and the cars thunder down the straight. One of the most memorable moments of any F1 race is the checkered flag, which signals the end of the race and the victory for the first driver to cross the finish line. For years, teams have celebrated this moment by hanging over the pit lane fencing, cheering on their drivers as they take the checkered flag and complete their victory lap. However, this tradition has now come to an end. The FIA, the governing body of motorsport, has reminded teams that they are only allowed in the pit lane immediately before they are required to work on a car and must withdraw as soon as the work is complete. This means that teams can no longer hang over the pit lane fencing to celebrate with their drivers. The reason for this change is safety. In recent years, there have been several incidents where team members have been injured while celebrating on the fencing. Therefore, the FIA has decided to enforce this rule to prevent further accidents. While it's understandable that fans and teams will miss this tradition, it's important to prioritize safety in all aspects of motorsport. Hopefully, this change will help to prevent any more injuries and ensure that F1 remains a safe and exciting sport for everyone involved. Now, we know what you're thinking. What about all those amazing celebrations we've seen over the years? According to motorsport.com, the teams will still be allowed to lean out of the significant gaps in the pit wall protection systems for teams to display pit boards if required. So, they can still cheer on their drivers, they just have to do it safely. But wait, there's more! The FIA did not lay out the penalty for any team member breaching the regulation, although it is thought it would be a monetary fine rather than a sporting penalty for the driver. So, if team members get too excited and climb on the fence, they could face a hefty fine. But have you ever wondered why some drivers get penalized for not being in the right spot on the starting grid? Well, the season's first 2 races saw some start anomalies where drivers like Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso needed to park their cars within the designated box on the grid. The FIA swiftly widened the starting boxes by 20 centimeters for the upcoming Australian Grand Prix, accommodating the larger modern F1 cars. Now, you might be thinking, why does a few centimeters here or there matter? Besides the neat and tidy optics of a perfectly aligned starting grid, the car's position can also affect the driver's launch and performance at the start. As the cars get faster and the wheels get bigger, the drivers face a new challenge on the track: visibility. The 18-inch wheels on the F1 Beasts may look impressive, but they make it challenging for drivers to see the white lines marking the boundaries of the pit lane. Thankfully, the FIA has taken a sensible approach to this issue by widening the pit boxes. These boxes, which have been the same size for decades, will now provide better visibility for the drivers. It's a small but crucial change that can make all the difference in a high-pressure pit stop. It's all about giving the drivers the best possible chance to perform at their peak and stay safe on the track. And with the FIA's thoughtful decision to widen the pit boxes, the drivers can focus on what they do best: pushing their machines to the limit and racing towards the checkered flag. This is just one example of how the current F1 regulatory regime is making more decisions per lap than ever before, from track limits to start positions. And while some drivers may gripe about the stricter policing, they know the rules are the rules, and without exception. As the FIA has widened the grid boxes by an extra 20 centimeters for the Australian Grand Prix to help drivers with their visibility problems. But wait, what's this? Grid box tweaks that won't solve the drivers' visibility problems? That's right, according to none other than Fernando Alonso. The 2-time world champion has expressed his skepticism about the changes made to the grid boxes, which have been widened and now feature a new guidance line to help drivers line up. Alonso believes these modifications will only do a little to assist with the difficulties. F1 veteran Fernando Alonso has shed some light on a challenge faced by drivers at the start of a race. The double whammy of limited visibility and strict starting rules can make things tricky for even the most skilled drivers on the grid. According to Alonso, the problem is twofold. Firstly, the drivers have very little visibility as they line up in position. On top of that, they must also remain totally focused on a separate yellow line, which marks the starting point for the race. It is difficult, Alonso admits, and we are very concentrated on the yellow line to not go too far forward. It's a small detail that can make a big difference at the start of a race, and one that requires total focus and precision from every driver. Alonso explains that as drivers approach the box, they are not looking at it directly, but rather at one side of the cockpit. This can be a distraction, making it even harder for them to get into the correct position. He does concede that the extra 20 centimeters of space will help, but more is needed to eradicate the problem entirely. Alonso's claims are backed up by his teammate Esteban Ocon, who received a penalty in the season opener in Bahrain for starting outside his marker. Ocon predicts there will be further infractions this year because it is much harder to see. Various drivers complained that they couldn't see anything from where they were sitting. F1 rookie Logan Sargent has highlighted a significant difference between F1 cars and the machinery he has raced in the past. According to Sargent, visibility is a key issue for drivers when lining up on the grid. "The first thing I noticed is you can't see anything," Sargent revealed. He explained that he had to rely on markers on the wall to determine how far forward he could pull. It's a challenge that requires a lot of skill and precision from the drivers, and it's no surprise that some struggle with it. The changes to the grid boxes have impacted more than just the cars. George Russell, a Mercedes driver, thinks it was difficult for the FIA to impose penalties for a regulation violation that drivers could easily make. Drivers believe that a 5-second penalty for being laterally out is too harsh. Obviously, they can't see anything when they line up, so the penalty needs to be reflected in difficulty. So, what does this mean for the upcoming races? Only time will tell, but one thing is sure. The drivers will face a difficult challenge as they try to navigate their way into the correct position on the grid. Let's hope they can rise and give us some thrilling races this season. So there you have it, folks. Alonso has made his opinion on the new FIA rule very clear, and his words are indeed stirring up much debate in the racing community. It's always interesting to see how these kinds of rule changes can impact the sport and the drivers, and it's clear that this one is not without controversy. We'll have to wait and see how things play out on the track, but one thing's for sure: the racing world is always full of surprises. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more updates on this story and all the latest news in motorsports.